going to talk about the one thing you need to do if you want to grow your business, if you want your money to operate for you the same way it operates for the wealthy individuals. What we were taught to do with money is give up control of it. Is your legacy going to be created out of a mindset that is conformed? Out of a mindset that you have been handed down through prior generations? They call that the legacy. But that legacy that was handed down to you was based on conforming false dreams. What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, Chris Naugle, and welcome back to the show. Today, we're going to talk about the one thing you need to do if you want to grow your business, if you want your money to operate for you the same way it operates for the wealthy individuals. The one thing that the wealthy understand and the wealthy do that you have never been taught to do. That's what today's episode's all about. But before we get into the episode, it's not just about the education. It's not just about what you learn on this episode or in anything in life. You've been taught to believe that knowledge is power. Well, that's wrong. Knowledge is not power unless it's applied. If it's not applied to actually create something, to change somebody else's life, that knowledge does nothing for you but waste your time. So please today, do not allow this episode to simply be just to get some more knowledge or just to get some entertainment. Please take action on at least one thing that I talk about in this episode. And I'll give you something to take action on. I'll give you something for free. I'll give you a copy of any one of my books for free. Private Money Guide, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery, or my book on how to get all the money back for all the cars you ever buy, drive, and own. You want any of these? Oh, and you don't want to pay for them? Yeah, that's about right. Go to chrisnaugle.com, Naugle, and then go to the books tab and grab the books. You can get the ebooks for free. If you want the hardcover, no problem. Those are free. Just pay shipping and handling. And if you want the book on how to get all the money back for all the cars you're ever going to buy, drive, and own, and by the way, that involves changing just one thing, then subscribe and register for the Wealth Webinar. That's totally free too. Just register for the event, which is every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and we will send you the book. Let's get into it. Throughout our lives, we are taught different things. We are brought up with the wisdom of our parents, our grandparents. But what happens if, as we're going through these lessons, this wisdom that's handed down from prior generations, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our great-great-grandparents, all the way to our parents, what if that information were wrong? What if that information was based on false beliefs? What if that information was based on failed dreams and failed realities, which then led you to have failed dreams and failed realities and a quitter's mindset, or just to stay exactly where you're at? Well, throughout my life, that's exactly what happened. And there was no ill will involved in this. It's not like my grandparents or my great-grandparents meant anything wrong for me. It's not like they gave me knowledge based on their past experiences and what they were handed down to hurt me. But indeed it did. And indeed it hurts all of you that are watching this. Indeed it hurts every American or every single person, because if we are handed down knowledge through the wisdom that they have, which is based on false pretenses or just misinformation, then we are also going to hand down that information, and we are going to affect our legacy. And our legacy is what we hand down to our children. And then our children hand that down to their children. You can see it's a ripple effect. So what if we just correct right here and right now the one thing that we have been taught about money that is all wrong? I'm not going to make this just about money, but this is where it all begins. Because everything from trade to what we eat, to how we eat, to where we live, everything involves money. And what is money? So many people have a misconception right from the get-go of what money actually is. Now, I don't care if you're talking about the dollar. I don't care if you're talking about gold. I don't care if you're talking about the yen. I don't care if you're talking about the euro. Whatever currency you trade in your country or wherever you're at, that's money. Because money is nothing more than a means of exchange. Money for food, food for money. Money for car, car for money. Money for house, house for money. Money is just a means of exchange. Doesn't matter what that money looks like. Doesn't matter what country it derives from. Doesn't matter if it's paper or actually a tangible metal or a precious metal. It's money. And what we've all been taught to do, it was also taught to our great-great-grandparents, to our great-grandparents, to our grandparents, to our father and mother. What we were taught to do with money is give up control of it. And that is where the problem lies. We have been taught to do what with money? Well, you've been taught first to work for money. You've been taught to put a monetary value on your hours, which is trading hours for dollars. This is just what we're all taught. Get a job, go to college, get a career. All of those, maybe it's something we love, maybe it's not something we love. That's irrelevant for this context. All of those involve trading our hours for dollars, for money. Each hour that we have is exchanged for a specific dollar value of money. And in our minds, we have been taught to believe that as time goes on, as we get more knowledge, as we get more wisdom, as we get more experience, that dollar amount that we trade our hour for goes up. Sound right? I know back when I was 14, I worked on a farm for $2.75 an hour. That was cool. But then as I got a little bit older, I wanted $5 an hour. And then I would say, oh my God, if I could only get $8 an hour. And if only I could get $12 an hour, $15 an hour, $20 an hour. Oh my gosh, someday I'll make $100 an hour. How many of you have said those same things or thought those same things? All of us. And it doesn't matter that you're coming up with a dollar value for your worth. The one problem right there is that your dollars really have an unlimited value because you can't get them back. You can always make more money. You can always go out there and find a way to work and trade hours for dollars to make more money. But can you ever get your time back? No. So that's the first thing. We have taught to value our time the wrong way. Wealthy individuals don't do that. See, the wealthy individuals have learned how not to give up control of their money. And I haven't yet told you how you give up control of your money, but I will. So just stay with me. Wealthy individuals began the same place many of us did. Most wealthy individuals came from rough beginnings, low income beginnings, heck, harsh environments. Doesn't matter. But they all changed one thing somewhere in there. And the one thing doesn't apply to just money. The one thing applies to many things, but we're just going to focus on the money part. And that one thing that the wealthy understood or figured out because of wisdom or just life lessons, they found out that they can't put a dollar value to their hours because if they do, they limit how much wealth they can have. Think about that. If all you ever did is trade hours for dollars, no matter what the denomination was for your hours worth within reason, you could never obtain the amount of wealth that you want because there's just not enough hours in the day. And we can't work 24/7, can we? No, we have limitations. We have to sleep. We have to eat. We have to rest. We have to do all these things, which limits our real productive hours to, depending on who you are, let's say 10 to 12 hours a day. Being realistic. Now, some of you are like, oh, heck, I work 15 hours a day. Do you do that 7 days a week? Probably not. So if there's a limit to how many hours you have, then why would you put a dollar value to those hours? Now, let me tell you what's unlimited. And this is the one change that the wealthy figured out. They figured out that where there is no limits is how hard their money can work for them. How hard their money can go out there and produce more money for them. There's no limit on that. Their money can work 24/7. Their money never has to stop for breaks, never has to stop for food, never has to stop for water, never has to stop to sleep. Their money, which yes, they worked for it, but their money has unlimited ability to produce more money if they change one thing. So back to what is that one thing that you have been doing wrong? What is that one thing that I did all wrong? I gave up control of my money, just as you do. And you don't even know you're doing this. That's how conditioned you are. When you trade your hours for dollars, you take your paycheck, the money that you earned by trading hours for dollars, and what do? You put it in someone else's bank. We all do this, don't we? We go down to our local traditional bank, wherever you are comfortable depositing your money, and you give up control of your money. Don't believe me? Well, when you hand over your deposit to that banker, does the banker take your deposit, put it in a little box marked with your name on it, and put it back in that vault or somewhere else? Do they do that? Absolutely not. There's no money in the vault. What do? They changed one thing in their business model, and they decided and figured out how to make your money and my money work for them. And all they had to do is convince us to give up control of it. So many of you are thinking, yeah, well, what's the alternative? I mean, we need banks. We have to use banks. You do, but you can use them to your advantage. What you're doing now by storing money in a bank, by putting money in a bank account, you are giving up control of that money. The bank then can take that money and do whatever they want with it. Can you tell the bank that you only want your deposit to be lent out on Ferrari car loans? No. The bank will lend your money out to anyone they deem acceptable by banks' underwriting guidelines, not your underwriting guidelines, and by banks' interest rates that they're charging, not the interest rate you want to earn. No, what you did is you gave up control of your money, and the bank then gave you one thing. What? A feeling of security called the FDIC, up to $250,000 by today's standards. That's not even real either, but we won't go there. You gave up control of your money, and what did you get in return? Well, some banks, very few, pay an interest rate to you. I mean, many of you listening to this right now, May of 2022, are earning 0% on the money that you leave in the bank. So what does the bank do? The bank turns around and lends that money out in various sorts of loans, from mortgages to car loans to lines of credit to home equity lines of credit to business startup loans. I could go on for days. And in doing that, they're making a spread. That spread that they make is always 400 to 1,300% more than what you make on that money that you gave up control of. If the bank pays you 1% and the bank lends that money out at 5%, how much did the bank make? 4% spread, which is how much more than you? Well, depending on how you're doing it. Could be 400% more than you, could be 500% more than you. Heck, it could be an infinite amount more than what you're earning, because you might be getting zero. That's the first mistake we've been taught. And this is where the wealthy changed one thing, and they changed where their money went first because they wanted to be in control of that money. Now, let's be transparent here. All of us are going to continue to work for money. That's not going to change. Okay. And until you evolve and figure out how to make your money work for you, or until you start abiding by one or all 6 of the laws of wealth, which is law number 1 of wealth, says you must save or keep 1/10 of your gross income. So how much do you make a year? How much do you make? Do you make 60,000? Do you make 600,000? Do you make 100,000? Multiply that times 10, and don't take the taxes out first. This is gross. That's how much money you should be saving. Are you saving that? If you're not, that's where you start. And many people are like, that's impossible. Who in their right mind saves 10% of the money they make? A lot of people. More than you can imagine, because they follow the first law of wealth, which is save and keep 1/10 of your money. But law number 2 falls right into that change of one thing. Law number 2 of wealth says your money must work for you. Law number 2 of wealth does not say your money should work for the bank. Law number 2 does not say your money should work for your advisor. Law number 2 does not say your money should work for Wall Street. Law number 2 says your money should work for you. Well, your money can't work for you until you change one thing, and that one thing puts you back in control of your money. The wealthy have figured this out many, many years ago, hundreds of years ago. The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Walt Disneys, the Ray Krocs, gosh, right up to the sitting president today. A large portion of their wealth is not warehoused in traditional banks. And by saying warehouse, think of it like a grain silo. They warehouse grain in silos. Where is your wealth being warehoused? And is it in your control? The answer is probably not. It's probably in control of the bank, in control of Wall Street, where you don't call the shots. You might pick and choose in Wall Street what funds you invest in, what stocks you invest in, but who's in control of that? Do you control what the companies that mutual fund owns does? No, you do not. You simply controlled the one pick of what mutual fund you wanted, if you even did that. And we wonder why we ride this crazy roller coaster ride. I used to often wonder that. I'd be up, then I'd have a bad event and bring me back down. Then I'd be up and I'd have another event that brought me down. I never actually stepped back to think about why that was. And it came down to one thing. I had given up control of my money. And because of that, I rode the roller coasters of Wall Street. I rode the roller coasters of whatever I put my money in. And then I bitched, I moaned, I complained, and I blamed everybody else for my money not doing what it was supposed to. But how can you blame someone else when you're the one initially that was taught to give up control of your money? Now, that one change in where that money goes is quite simple. My book that I already told you about, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery, tells you all about it. So without wasting any time talking about that one change, why don't you just grab a copy of my book at chrisnaugle.com and read the book, or go to chrisnaugle.com. Maybe you don't like to read, and watch the 90-minute video that will tell you all about where your money should go first, where your 10% of the money you make should go first. It's that simple, folks. By making one change, your money is now in your control. By making one change, your money can now earn uninterrupted compound interest, the ability for you to save and spend without interrupting the interest that your money earns. With that, just changing that one thing, just like, again, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Morgans, the Stanleys, and those great bankers of their time, they realized and understood this. If they changed who held their money, who warehoused their capital, they could change everything else. They could create a perpetual legacy for their families, which indeed they did. And it didn't require them to work any harder. It didn't require them to work any longer. And it didn't require them to take on any additional risk than they were now. It just involved changing one thing, which put a perpetual tailwind behind their money called compound interest. But then we add in front of compound interest the word uninterrupted. Imagine that. There's no more need for imagination, folks. What there is a need for is you to learn what this one thing actually is. And it's not the silver bullet. Not every one of you are going to be able to do this, but the majority of you can. The majority of you can and should, but the ones that can't eventually will be able to, once you apply the first law of wealth, which is you must save 1/10 of the money you make. Once you start there, everything else gets easy. But then you're probably going to say, oh, but I got all this debt. I live paycheck to paycheck. Well, why is that? Oh, I wanted to buy this. No. You were taught to give up control of your money. You didn't have control of your money. Otherwise, you could have financed all those things that you bought using those credit cards. If you had the money in your control, if you applied the first law of wealth and then the second law, which is make your money work for you, those things could have been how your money was working for you. But instead, you didn't. You gave up control of your money. You then put that control in the banks, which then lent the money back to you via credit card, lines of credit, or car loans, or any other loan at a higher interest rate than what they pay you. You see, you have created the problem for yourself. And it's very easy to change. You got to change your mindset first. You got to somehow find the way to get off of the path everybody else is on, which is the path that leads you to the big lie, which the big lie is you've been taught to give up control of your money. But you've also been taught something else. So let's go into the other one thing you have to change, which is your mindset. So let's talk about that. You know, I read a lot of books, but there's a couple things I listen to on a very regular basis. One of them is Earl Nightingale's The Strangest Secret in the World. And in that reading, which is about 29 minutes, Earl goes on to explain that he has gone on a life journey to figure out what is the difference between someone that is successful and someone that is not. And he boils it down in his little talk to one thing. What is the one thing that makes the difference between someone being successful and someone not being successful? Do you know what it is? Because if you don't, this is very important. And it all comes down to mindset. Here's how he explains it. He went out and he interviewed 100 20-year-olds. And he asked them all a single solitary question. Will you be successful at the age of 65? That was his question. What do you think the answer of all 100 of these 20-year-olds was? Of course, it was yes. Every one of them with resounding confidence said, of course, yes, I'm going to be successful at the age of 65. Great. So now we got a bunch of motivated, optimistic 20-year-olds. Earl goes on to fast forward through time. And he goes to the age of 65, where he resorts over to Social Security for statistics. And he says, those 20-year-olds, those 100 20-year-olds, what has happened to them? Have they all gone on to be successful? Well, the statistic created by Social Security says this. Out of those 100 20-year-olds, only 5 of them will be financially successful, which means there's a failure rate of 95%. So 95 out of the 100 20-year-olds that all said they were going to be successful, 95% of them are not financially successful, period. Out of the 5 that were, only 1 of them is wealthy. Only 1. The rest are financially successful. So why is that? How can we go from every one of those 20-year-olds saying they're going to be successful to then the statistics showing that only 5 out of those 100 will be successful, only 5%. So what is the one thing that 5%, those 5 successful individuals did different? One thing, folks. What is it? Earl Nightingale goes on to say, through all of his studies, through all of his research, through everything that he can come up to figure out, it boils down to one thing: creation. 5 out of those 100 20-year-olds created. They created something. Some of them went on to create companies that solved big problems for people. Some of them went on to create their financial future and thought about it every single day, focused on it, and made it happen. The 5 created. That's the one thing that they did different. But what did the other 95 do that was so wrong? I'll tell you, it's simple. You see this every day today. Every day of your life, you can see this. You turn on the TV, pull up social media. This is what the 95 unsuccessful individuals did. They conformed. They conformed to somebody else's failed realities, somebody else's failed dreams, somebody else's failed attempt. Who are those somebody else's? Our great-grandparents, our grandparents, our mom, our dads. They were all taught to conform by the prior generation. And the prior generation was taught to conform by their prior generation because they were all taught to give up control of their money. They were never taught what the wealthy do with money. They were never taught to not trade their hours for dollars, to focus on making their dollars, their money, work for them. They were never taught to be in control of their money. They were just taught to do what the prior failed reality did. They all conformed. So there you have it. The mindset shift that you have to undertake is one of creation. You have to start thinking about what it is you're going to create. What is the life you're going to create? What is your perfect day that you are going to create? What does it look like from the second you wake up and open your eyes to the moment you close your eyes at the end of the day? What does your perfect day actually look like? Do you know? Can you tell me and anyone else right now what your perfect day looks like? I bet you out of all of you, there's less than 1% of you that can tell us that. And if you can't tell us what your perfect day looks like, what your family legacy looks like, how can you ever create it? You cannot create something that you haven't manifested in your mind. You cannot create something that you haven't thought about. You cannot create something that you haven't dreamed about. You can only conform to what other people have dreamed. You can only conform to what other people have thought about. You can only conform to what other people have done. And many of those other people, unless they're the 5%, many of those other people have conformed to failed dreams, conformed to failed realities. This cannot be you. You must change that one thing. You must change your mindset to one of creation. What is it you are going to create? And when you create, you must follow the laws of wealth. Law number 1, save 1/10 of the money you earn. Law number 2, make that 1/10 of the money you earn work for you. Law number 3, protect that wealth by investing in things you know, like, and understand, or investing with people that have knowledge through wisdom which is earned through time and failure. You must not seek unrealistic returns, which is the 4th law of wealth. If you seek unrealistic returns, your money will flee you. The 5th law of wealth says you must solve someone else's problem. If you're not out there creating something that solves somebody else's problem, then your problem will never be solved. Law number 6. Law number 6. You must create your legacy. Is your legacy going to be created out of a mindset that is conform? Out of a mindset that you have been handed down through prior generations? They call that the legacy. But that legacy that was handed down to you was based on conforming false dreams, failed realities. You don't want to conform. What you want your legacy to be is one of creation, is one of abundance, is one of giving, is one of going through your life serving others, is one of going through life solving other people's problems. If you just change the way you think about your legacy will change everything for your family's future. You will be long gone, but your legacy will live on. Your legacy will live on. But we need to come back to the now, because we've gone back in time. We've talked about what the wealthiest families did in the past. We talked about what our great-grandparents, our grandparents, our mothers, our fathers did and what they taught us. And a lot of what they taught us, unless they were the 5%, was based on conformity, was based on failed information, was based on misinformation. And that was all going back to what we do with money. What we do with money is give up control of it. And then we wonder why our money isn't working for us. We wonder why our money rides the craziest roller coaster in the markets. We wonder why it just seems like we always have bad luck. Folks, don't believe in luck. Luck simply follows opportunity. Create your own opportunities. Create your own legacy. Create your own abundance. Create. Folks, the secret is just that. It's creation. Followed by being in control. And the one thing you really want to be in control of, there's many things you could be in control of, is your money. Because your money is the tool throughout your life that you will use to create, to teach, and to pass on your legacy. Folks, like I said earlier, if you want to learn more about this, if this really resonates with you and you really want to dive deeper, then join us every single week at 1 p.m. Eastern for the Wealth Webinar Series. It's free. Go to chrisnaugle.com and register for the webinar. You can show up. We'll send you the recordings. Start getting around the campfire. Start learning how to create. Start learning how to change who's in control of your money, and start now. I said it earlier, knowledge is not power. Application is. Grab my books, sign up for the webinar, take action on what you just learned. I hope you all enjoyed this episode of the Money School podcast. We'll see you on the next one.